What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Okay, Middlekauff Mailbag. At John Middlekauff is my Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Bears fan. Not a Bears question, though. Everyone is wondering about the Cowboys and Dak, but it seems really similar to the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. Dion already named the Cowboys as a landing spot for Shedeur along with a few other teams. It feels obvious to me, but can it be that simple? Well, let's say Shedeur is really good. And I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I was texting with a buddy probably a couple weeks ago, NFL scout, and he was at Colorado. And I said, what do you think about North Dakota State upset Colorado week 1? He's like, no chance. He's like, 1, being at Colorado, they look pretty good. They look better than they did last year in terms of talent. 2, the quarterback's really impressive. And like, he's clearly talent-wise. Off the field, in terms of crushing teammates online, the leeway Dion allows him to do, I don't know if you really get that in the pros. You kind of got to shape in, but I think when it's all said and done, it's not inconceivable he's the number 1 overall pick. If Dallas wins 8, 9, 10, 11 games, they're not even remotely close. And this is not the NBA. If Dion goes, we won't play, you go, sure you won't. What are you going to do? Sit out the year? Even when that happened to Eli, he's like, I won't play there. He still got picked and then just got traded. But it was to the team drafting 4. So if the Cowboys are drafting, let's just pick a number, it's 24. Dion's like, I want him to play in Dallas. I want him to play in Atlanta. And it's not happening. So it gets complicated fast. I hope I answered your question. The difference is Minnesota, I guess there were so many quarterbacks in this draft that they knew they would get one of them. They had the 2 first-round picks. They were cool once they signed Sam Darnold, I think, regardless of what happened. I don't know if Jerry doesn't feel like he wants to put himself in that position because there was some unknown. The offseason, once Kirk signed, the draft, it could have gone some other way. I mean, it's not inconceivable that someone trades up, drafts a guy. I heard on the mailbag recently how you feel about the Raiders over the last few years. I get why we're looked down upon, but I do think we have a direction, even with a bridge quarterback. Do you think the Raiders originally wanted Penix before Atlanta snagged him from Vegas, Minnesota, etc.? Hope I make the mailbag. I don't think it's inconceivable that they liked either Penix or Bo Nix. Because I saw Sean Payton saying he was getting a little nervous with the Raiders. Kind of sniffing around. I've said all along, and I get it because they gave him a lot of money. So it was kind of a tough spot. I do wonder if the Raiders regret if they like Penix or Bo Nix a lot, not just trading with someone like the Chargers or something. Like, would it have been worth it for them to give up their first rounder the following year and just go from wherever they were, 13 to 5? Flipping, giving a 3rd-round pick and a 1st-rounder next year. So I don't know exactly. I think they have to a little bit because they're in this weird no man's land. Whenever I see someone picking them to finish last in terms of like having the number 1 overall pick, I'm like, that's impossible. They have too many good players. But if the quarterback situation is what most people think it's going to be, that's like 6 to 7 wins. And that just puts you in this weird spot, which sucks. I mean, let's face it. If you're Mike McCarthy, do you really want to come back to Dallas after the season, regardless of the outcome? Pittsburgh and Philly may be options at season end. I think if you're Mike McCarthy and you have a successful season, you would want to stay. You're the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Like, you don't want to leave managing the Yankees or the Lakers or Manchester United, right? Like if you're Tiger Woods' caddy, like it's a pretty good gig. So I would say 100% he wants to stay. And if he earns it, if they're in the NFC Championship game, like I think he's getting it. I think what would be interesting, like let's say they make the wild card, win a round, and then get beat in the second round. What happens there? That's where it would be weird. The Steelers, yeah, I mean, I think that you would want to lean offensive. He's all these guys that we see getting hired. Mike McCarthy, like Dave Canales, impressive year last year with the Bucs. Who would you hire if you had the opportunity? Mike McCarthy or Dave Canales? Jonathan Gannon, met the guy at the combine. Seems like a nice guy. Who would you hire if you could choose? Like these are typically the names in these cycles. So Mike McCarthy, if it doesn't work out in Dallas, and let's say they're pretty solid this year, wild card out. Can you imagine? Now the crew, here's the one issue. Vrabel. Now McCarthy's accomplished more than Vrabel, been doing it longer. Offensive guy too. Belichick, who's probably specific to Philly or Dallas, you'd think, maybe New York. I don't know. I think if Mike McCarthy is let go, he would 100% immediately get interviews. My friends and I have this debate all the time. How is a defensive holding an automatic first down? But an offensive holding penalty is just 10 yards. Resetting the down makes the penalty way more severe for the defense. I get offense pays the bills, and everyone loves seeing touchdowns, but defensive holding should be a 10-yard penalty with no automatic first down. Wondering what you think about defensive holding and if it should be automatic. My take is it should be where the holding takes place. So if it's 3rd and 12, nothing grinds my gears more than when it's 3rd and long and a holding happens within 3 or 4 yards, innocuous or blatant, and you get an automatic first down. That is bullshit. That is insane. It should then be, like you said, 3rd and 8. So you get to redo the down, but you don't get the 12 yards. Or if it's 3rd and 9 and it's 5 yards, it's 3rd and 4. I was thinking this the other day because I was watching, it was when Caleb threw that bomb to not one of the main 3 guys. I forget the guy's name. And the dude on the Bengals grabs him. I mean, the dude might have scored and got pass interference. And it was like 45-yard pass interference. I do wonder if we would be better served. Now, you could argue it would be much more promoted for defensive players to commit egregious pass interferences on bombs that now obviously they try to avoid, but just do the college rule that you only get 15 yards. Because now that I'm talking about it, I do see the other side of like, well, my guy would have caught it. He tackled him 5 yards before. But that play is a low percentage play to begin with. I guess I'll say this. If you told me that tomorrow Goodell sends out a memo and says, we have changed pass interference from at the spot, wherever it goes down, and can be 20, 30, 50, however many yards, to just an automatic first down, 15-yard penalty, you would not hear me complain. You would not hear me complain at all. That's definitely one I like with one college rule that I'm really behind. Just heard Colin on the Herd today playing the clip of Pete coming back to USC and wanted to bring this question back to the top of the queue and see if it's relevant more today. So the question, born and raised in Orange County, but I've been a Bay Area native for the past 18 years. 4 years, D1, water polo, Cal Berkeley. No big deal. Good shape, good education. Then transitioned to the beautiful world of tech sales in San Francisco. This guy's probably doing well. Cal grad, tech sales. Getting taxed high, but you're probably making a lot of coin. Go Niners. Have a 2-part question. As a lifelong Trojan fan, with USC headed to the Big Ten, I am more than concerned. Preaching the choir, bro. Lincoln Riley squandered the Heisman winner, and their defense is a joke. Number 1, can Lincoln Riley's program have success in the Big Ten? Number 2, if they go close to 500, can you see them taking a phone call from Pete? Pete, in my opinion, is a strong arm run game with a hard-nosed defense. Do you know what's sad, really quick, is I saw that clip, I think on Instagram. It was like a Seattle local radio. And Doug Baldwin and this famous radio host up there, Softy, had Pete on. And I think Doug asked him, like, do you plan on coaching again? And I think Pete, they were talking more NFL specific. I think Pete gave a pretty revealing answer without specifically saying it. He, to me, reading between the lines, is like, I don't expect anyone to ever hire me again. Now, he was the oldest coach in the league last year. The defense has been bad. But I do think it's fair to say he is never going to be an NFL coach again as a head coach. And he's made so much money. In what world would he want to be an assistant? Though, if he'd be like, yeah, I'll be your DB coach for $1 million a year, he'd be one of the best DB coaches in the league. He'd be the best DB coach in the league. Him and Belichick. The difference is Belichick could immediately be like the best position coach at like 90% of the positions. Offensive line, obviously defensive line, linebacker, DB, he'd be elite. Tight end, running back, O-line, quarterback, and wide receiver, wouldn't be my first hire, but he could do it. I don't think Lincoln Riley works at USC. He's actually been on this podcast before, years ago, when most of you were not listening. So my guy that hired me and got me into football at Fresno State has been at Oklahoma for a long time. His title now is basically the GM, but got there with Bob Stoops, stayed with Lincoln, and now they're still with Venables. And I root for Oklahoma because of Drew Hill. And, Baker Mayfield, they're a fun program to root for. And I liked Lincoln a lot. And I thought that it fit so well. Small town Texas guy, went to Texas Tech, Mike Leach, Bob Stoops. It just worked. And I don't see it working at LA. And to me, LA is like, kind of takes a special guy. And I just think Lincoln is not California. You can't fake where you're from. You really can't. I have West Coast tendencies that I will not shake. Just like people from the Northeast have things that, like, Belichick works in the Northeast. Tom Coughlin works in the Northeast. Just like Spurrier and Bowden and Kirby and Nick Saban work in the South. And I don't see it working. And I think their team is going to be not good this year. So you pay a guy $120 million, they're not going to fire him. But could they basically just look at each other and be like, this is not working? And Lincoln just goes coaches Florida. I don't even know if that would be a great fit, but just wherever, some other program that fits more him, Arkansas. I don't know. I just don't believe that USC and him are a cultural match. Would you hire a guy 74 years old? I would say this, you could do way worse. And if Lincoln Riley goes 7-5, which was 100% on the table. I mean, think about this. They gave Lincoln Riley $120 million. And by year 3, he's begging out of the LSU game. And you'd go, well, LSU just won no, actually, they didn't. They went 9-3. They lost their Heisman Trophy quarterback, right behind your quarterback. They fired their defensive coordinator. They lost Malik Neighbors, who's pretty damn good. They also had another wide receiver go in the top 25. I mean, it's not like they didn't lose and have a lot of question marks with their team. And Brian Kelly said, hell no, we want that game. Why wouldn't he want that game? Because like most people, I think LSU is going to kill them. I think they're going to shove them around. Hope I'm wrong, because I like it when USC is good. I think they're going to stink relative to the hype. We anointed this team as like, Lincoln's there, they're going to compete for national titles. They don't even feel remotely close. Think about this. Nobody, let me rephrase this. Most people are not picking LSU and Brian Kelly to make the playoff this year. Doesn't mean it can't happen. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But I would say most people around college football think they're more likely to be like 9-3, 8-4, and not a playoff team. Yet I would imagine 99% of people that talk about college football are picking LSU without even hesitating in that game. They're both going into year 3. Remember, it was kind of a letdown when Lincoln went to USC and not to LSU. And then when Brian Kelly was, in a weird way, their fallback, who they gave $95 million to. So I don't know, man. I I, I think USC is in trouble. I just don't think it works. I just don't think it works. I think sometimes, like in the NFL, if you can coach, you can coach. Shane Steichens from Sacramento went to UNLV's coaching in Philly and Indy. No one cares, right? Uh, Kyle Shanahan grew up in Denver. Now Andy Reid's LA, Philly. None of it matters. Went to BYU. None of it matters. College, it does because of recruiting, because of the boosters. In the NFL, you deal with one guy, the owner, unless you're with the Bears or the Packers. Then you deal with Kevin Warren or the board. But even the Packers deal with Murphy, who's retiring, and whoever the new guy's going to be. In the NFL, 90% of the teams, there's one call I have to answer. It's the owner. Been hungry for some college football? Well, we finally get a taste this weekend. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a small but mighty slate of games for Week 0, including a big matchup in Ireland. This is going to be DraftKings' biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride, now all the way through the expanded playoffs. Plus, all newbies getting into the college spirit, here's something extra special. New DraftKings customers bet just $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. Crown is yours. Mailbag. I was wondering if you had any tips on how to start scouting in general. I want to start at the high school level. I would say in 2024, you have so many resources that I would utilize. I'm more of a visual guy than I learn better through video than I would through reading. There are incredible books out there, scouting manuals and stuff, but they're just type in YouTube, one of the biggest search engines in the world. Type in whatever you want in terms of how to scout, what to look for in scouting, how people have done it. I mean, a lot of people do it and then just learn. To me, the key, it's a teachable skill, right? There are certain things in life, like you got to be born with certain abilities. Scouting is not one of those. It can be taught. 1,000,000% be taught. And you just need to watch. And the more you watch, the more you learn on what to look for. High schools can be a little complicated because of projecting guys. You know, they grow so much if you're watching a 15, 16-year-old. Getting fired up for football. This is Danny. So I would utilize YouTube. Can you please break down how a quarterback like Mac Jones was a Pro Bowler 3 years ago, and now he's lucky to even make a roster? I mean, he's not he's the backup quarterback for the Jags. Like, he's a top 45 quarterback in the league. Is it poor coaching, weak roster, lack of buy-in from the organization, or all the above? What gets back to the player. So he made a Pro Bowl as an alternate. A lot of guys have Pro Bowls on their roster. Like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes were Pro Bowlers last year. Well, Patrick Mahomes couldn't play in the Pro Bowl. Last year's a bad example because they don't even play the game anymore. But let's use the Mac Jones year. Like when Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or whoever can't play in the game, Josh Allen just doesn't go to the game. Why? He's playing golf at Pebble Beach in the AT&T. He will never, if the game still happened or whatever they're doing, will never show up because that weekend is always the AT&T Pro-Am. And he is going to play in that thing till he dies, or until he can't play golf. So you got to fill these spots. And so Mac Jones was not a Pro Bowler, but he was solid. They also won a game that year where he had 3 pass attempts. It was a uniquely situated team, fantastic defense, good running game. But Mac Jones is a symptom of quarterback inflation and guys getting drafted that don't have the physical skills to get drafted where he did. If you told me Mac Jones was a 3rd or 4th round pick, I wouldn't argue with you at all. Where guys like Nick Foles went. You see a lot of guys kind of that mold. You know, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott. Now, some of those guys work out, some of them don't. But picking Mac Jones at 15 overall is one of the most insane draft picks of all time. I said this at the time. Trey Lance was a disaster. But if Kyle Shanahan had gotten his wishes and taken Mac Jones at number 3 overall, it would have been the most arrogant and ridiculous draft pick in the history of the league. It would have been the least talented anyone has ever been picked in the top 3 in NFL history. He does not have the physical characteristics. And his one shining moment in college was a COVID year where Bama was working out the whole offseason. Rightfully so. I don't blame him at all. And a stacked team. And obviously LSU had just lost everybody from the previous year. And a bunch of guys didn't play. And he kicked everyone's ass. But he's average mobility, average arm. Clearly, as you saw in New England, which wasn't all his fault, kind of arrogant. Not exactly, I wouldn't call him Tom Brady, in terms of teammate and listens to coaches. So if you could redo the draft, he was just traded for a 6-rounder. He's better than that. But to me, if I was just doing a board going into the draft, and I said the same thing about Kenny Pickett, they're 3rd, 4th round picks who I'd rather have in the 4th round. I'd rather not use my 3rd round pick on them. Historically, that's where guys like that went. And then ever since, I would say, the Mahomes effect on the league, it just changed the world forever. And these quarterbacks get overdrafted. And then you got problems. It's why I think everyone's can't figure out Brock Purdy. They're like, in a day and age, when you got to draft quarterbacks so freaking high, even aren't that good, you're telling me they got their sweet starting quarterback with the last pick in the draft? It drives people nuts. It's like, yeah, it happened. I don't want to come off sounding like a homer, but I think the Seahawks are a team that is being wildly underrated. They're over under 7.5, and they're coming off back-to-back 9-win years. The team is arguably significantly better with an extremely underrated defense that McDonald will surely take to the next level. We'll see how Ryan Grubb's offense translates to the NFL, but Washington's offense was elite, and the Seahawks certainly have enough playmakers. I agree. Why is no one talking about Seattle and them being in a great position to compete for a wild card spot? Side note, I think McDonald was the greatest guy you could hire in a division with McVay and Shanahan, as there was no way you could hire that guy that would be able to scheme hire a guy that would be able to scheme either one of them offensively. I agree. It was a good hire. His nickname in Baltimore was Boy Genius. Mike McDonald is a really, really impressive guy. Fantastic hire. And like you said, Ryan Grubb's offense, he has 3 sweet wide receivers. I mean, Jackson Smith and DK, that alone, young guys, and Tyler Lockett's been good forever. Kenneth Walker's a stud. Pass rush, a little bit of a question mark for me. But, and listen, having that against McVay and Shanahan, I'm with you. We saw McDonald last year against Shanahan, punked him on Christmas. I mean, he destroyed, he curb stomped him. That's, of all Shanahan's like good teams, it's one of the most eye-opening losses I've ever seen, I can remember. But I think here's the problem. Quarterback's Geno Smith. And this is where some of you guys push back, like, Geno's better than you give him credit for. It's Geno Smith. When you go around the league and you go, I want to play that guy, it's not one of the first guys like, I don't want to play this guy. This guy makes me nervous. Now, Ryan Grubb is, I think, elite. I had the biggest bet I've ever made in my life was him against Steve Sarkisian's defense in that Final Four game. And I honestly pussed out because I split it on the spread and the money line. Should have just hammered the money line because Ryan Grubb and DuBois against Sark was a massive mismatch. Honestly, they should have been a 20-point win. Texas fans, you know it. But I had to sweat it out, but still. He's never coached in the NFL. And I'm not saying that that's a deterrent that you can't make a transition, but it's a pretty big, it's one thing to go from, hey, position coach in the SEC, work my way in the NFL, work my way up, become a coordinator. He's a lifetime college guy. And really most of his career, smaller schools. And these last 2 years, I would say, put him on the map. And 2 years ago, remember, Saban tried to hire him and he turned him down. So this guy's the real deal. But coaching the NFL, the comfort, like one thing with McDonald is worked in the NFL a long time now, knows the strengths and weaknesses of a lot of players in the league, like has a pretty good idea of offensive coordinators, knows what it's like to play against Kyle, to play against LaFluer, to play against McVay, whoever, the best teams around the league. He's played them all. Ryan Grubb has not. He's never coached against the 49ers players, the Rams players, the whoever. I'd have to look at Seattle's schedule, but regardless, it's like Belichick and Andy Reid's and Pete Carroll's greatest strength. There's not a player in the league who they didn't scout, who they haven't coached against, who they haven't evaluated. Belichick knew everyone's strengths and weaknesses going back to the 70s. So his knowledge on players, again, it's on him to build his team good enough. But he knows everything about every player in the league, especially once he starts game planning for them on a weekly basis. That institutional knowledge, like there's not a player in the league Andy Reid doesn't have pretty good knowledge of. And a lot of them knows them really well. I'm talking about opponents. And obviously all the defensive coordinators in the NFL, some of them Andy's seen a bunch, some of them Andy's just seen once or twice, but he's coached against all of them. And if they're a new defensive coordinator and they're come from a place, he's coached against everyone in that tree. Ryan Grubb just hasn't. So that move always makes me a little nervous. It's a transition. Obviously, his offense was extremely successful and was awesome to watch. But I do think that's an underrated jump. I sneaky get a lot of Seattle questions. Seattle fan, I wanted to ask you about Geno. Rumors saying he wants an extension prior to the season. I like Geno, but he did sign a prove-it deal just last year where he regressed. Beard, Hawks fans all over the internet screaming how bad the O-line was. My thoughts are he's 0-5 against the Niners, has never won a playoff game. In my opinion, giving a 34-year-old a quarterback extension with 0 playoff wins would be a second dumbest move and franchise is done. Throwing on the 1 yard line is the dumbest. I agree. I'd rather trade him for a 7th round pick and rock 23-year-old Sam Howell. Here's what I would say. John Schneider is now in the quarterback market. Under no circumstances would they give Geno Smith a contract extension unless he signed for like $5 million a year. They will not give him a contract extension. That will not happen. And John has been in the deep end because I have buddies that are on the road and see him at games. Over the last couple of years, Will Levis, like he's just been sniffing around. Obviously, Penix, Bo Nix. They have been doing their due diligence over the last couple of years. Even that last year, Russell Wilson on these quarterbacks. And I don't think that's stopping them. I think that is their number one goal right now. And the problem is they're going to be good enough where let's talk about teams that are all in searching for a quarterback. Number one would be the Raiders. You could argue that Seattle could be right behind them, if not equals, because they both go, if we just had a good quarterback, we got a bunch of players on this roster. Why couldn't we be a playoff team every single year? And here's the thing about John. He was the guy that found Russell Wilson and convinced them to take him. He was the guy that wanted to trade Russell Wilson and take Josh Allen. I think he's one of the better GMs in the league. And now it's just, can he figure out which quarterback in this class he wants and how he's going to trade up to get him? So Geno Smith, it's been awesome. He kept the franchise afloat because when you traded Russell Wilson, a lot of times it could have just been ugly. Like the previous DMer said, we won 9 games back-to-back years. Your last couple of years have not been that bad. You've had some bad moments in the season, but you've also had some great moments. Kicking Russell's ass, the Monday night game against the Eagles, making the playoffs 2 years ago, being right in the playoff mix last year up until the last couple of weeks. You've been more than credible with an awful defense. Fun offense. Kenneth Walker, love that guy. He's might be one of my favorite underrated players in the league. I don't even know if people consider him underrated, but you got to find your guy. You got to find, Mike McDonald's Bo Nix or Mike McDonald's Brock Purdy. Ultimately, the Rams will see Stafford's health. They got to start thinking about that. Who's going to be McVay's next guy? It ain't Stetson Bennett. It's obviously not Jimmy G. But I think in a perfect world, like next year, the Rams, 36, 37-year-old Stafford, you keep him, you redshirt a guy behind him. Maybe you draft a quarterback next year in the first round. So there are a lot of teams sniffing around. I mean, the Jets, Rodgers, 40. They're going to need a quarterback. Do you think Matt LaFleur is the most underrated coach in the league? Seems like other coaches who have come from the Shanahan tree get more love. O'Connell and McDaniel for sure. Well, think about this. You know what's funny? O'Connell just seems like a good guy, former quarterback, good looking. Uh, Made the playoffs 2 years ago and got beat in the first round by Daniel Jones. Like that happened. We witnessed it in Minnesota. That's a bad loss. Mike McDaniel, who he's just funny. I think people are just they talk about him a lot because he's a unique character. But on the field, even if I give him a pass 2 years ago, I mean, he had to play a playoff game with Skylar Thompson, and they actually did pretty well against the Bills. The Bills at one point in time were 6-6, and the Dolphins, I forget their exact 10-1 or 9-2, or they were 3, 4, 5 games ahead of them, and they lost the division, and then got curb stomped, just throttled, just Chuck Liddell haymaker to the throat / chin / eye in the first round against Chiefs. And everyone kind of circle jerks both guys. I'm with you. Yet LaFleur, it's like, oh, Rodgers a shot. McCarthy couldn't figure it out. Resurrects him back-to-back MVPs. Wins playoff games. Then it gets a little weird that last Rodgers season. He's like, oh, we're going to Love. When the dust settles, they're in the playoffs with Jordan Love working the Cowboys. Something the other two guys can't do. So it's like, oh, you won playoff games with Aaron Rodgers. No shit. Okay, let's not even count that. He just took Jordan Love, a 4-year project. First half of the season looked awful. By the end of the season, we're talking like, this guy's a franchise quarterback. Goes on the road in the playoffs, doesn't win a playoff game, dominates. And honestly, could have easily beat the Niners. I say over and over again, I don't know, all these guys, like obviously McVay and Shanahan have done a lot, put them in their own category. But why are we talking about LaFleur with O'Connell or McDaniel? McDaniel can't dream of winning a playoff game, let alone the division. O'Connell got to the playoffs early with his veteran good quarterback and lost to the Giants. That happened. I watched it on the couch. So I hear you. I hear you. He gets, I don't know. Maybe it's the eyebrows. I'm not quite sure, but not in my world. Like I don't have LaFleur. You know, Shanahan's beat him multiple times in the playoffs, but I would have him above the rest of the crew of dudes. I'll promise you that. I mean, if you just did the Shanahan, if you just polled most people in the media, it's like, okay, Shanahan, McVay, or McVay, Shanahan, whatever. Who's the next? I'm with you. They'd be like, oh, that quirky dude with the expensive sunglasses in Miami and Kevin O'Connell. I love Kevin. And I like those guys too. Like, obviously, Mike McDaniel and Kevin O'Connell are good coaches. But I think most people put them above LaFleur. It's like, hey, guys, remember what he did? I mean, remember what this guy did with Jordan Love? Keeps a little chip on your shoulder, though, if you're a Packer fan.